Dr. Marcus Webb's hands trembled as he stared at the X-ray illuminated before him. 23 years in emergency medicine had prepared him for broken bones, torn ligaments, even the occasional foreign object lodged in impossible places. But this defied every law of human anatomy he'd ever studied. The patient's ribcage was growing inward, not collapsing, growing. New bone formation spiraling toward the lungs like skeletal fingers reaching for something hidden deep within the chest cavity. The patient sat 3 floors below in examination room 7, breathing normally, complaining only of a tickling sensation near his heart. Marcus's coffee grew cold on his desk as he scrolled through the digital file. Patient histories that read like fever dreams. A woman whose hair had turned to something resembling insect antennae overnight. A child whose tears crystallized into tiny, sharp fragments that cut his own cheeks. A man who insisted he could taste colors, until his tongue started changing hue to match whatever he looked at. The hospital's basement archive held 17 similar cases. 17 files marked with a red stamp, unexplained. 17 patients who had walked through these doors with conditions that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist according to every medical textbook ever written. And they were all connected. Marcus didn't know how yet. But in the margin of each file, written in faded pencil, was the same notation: patient mentioned dreams of the White Room. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into these disturbing medical cases that will make you question everything you know about the human body, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Are you alone right now? You might want to turn on some lights for this one. If you're ready to hear about patients who defied medical science itself, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which case disturbs you the most. Dr. Marcus Webb had built his career on certainty. Presbyterian Memorial Hospital in downtown Portland had been his professional home for over 2 decades, a place where diagnoses followed predictable patterns and treatments adhered to evidence-based protocols. His office on the 4th floor overlooked the city's western hills, and his days followed a comfortable rhythm: morning rounds, afternoon consultations, evening documentation. He was known among the staff as Dr. Protocol, not an insult, but a term of respect. When other physicians encountered puzzling cases, they brought them to Marcus. He had a gift for finding the logical thread in seemingly inexplicable symptoms, for recognizing rare conditions that others missed. The hospital itself was a sprawling complex built in phases over 80 years. The original 1940s structure formed the core, with its Art Deco facade and narrow corridors. Newer wings jutted out like branches, all glass and steel and modern efficiency. But it was the basement that told the real story, a labyrinth of storage rooms, old surgical theaters, and filing archives that predated digital records. Marcus rarely ventured down there. Until 3 weeks ago. It started with a routine request from administration. The hospital was digitizing old patient files, and Marcus, as chief of internal medicine, needed to review certain cases flagged as medically significant. He expected tuberculosis outbreaks from the 1950s, perhaps early AIDS cases from the 1980s. Historical curiosities, nothing more. What he found instead kept him awake at night. The files were stored in a section of the basement that smelled of mildew and old paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The filing cabinets were arranged in rows, labeled by decade. Marcus pulled open the drawer marked 1990 to 1995, unexplained cases. Inside were 17 folders, each thicker than normal patient files, stuffed with handwritten notes, photographs, and test results. The red stamp on each one, unexplained, was bold enough to bleed through to the papers beneath. He'd started reading them at his desk, thinking he'd find misdiagnoses or incomplete workups. Instead, he found meticulous documentation of impossible conditions. Physicians describing symptoms they couldn't classify. Specialists from across the country consulted, all equally baffled. Patients who should have died but didn't. Patients who should have recovered but deteriorated in ways that made no medical sense. The photographs were worse than the clinical notes. A woman's spine that had begun to branch like coral. A man's fingernails that had fused together into single, hardened plates. A child whose eyes had developed a reflective layer that glowed in dim light, like an animal's. Marcus had tried to dismiss them as elaborate hoaxes, or perhaps cases of undiagnosed genetic disorders now better understood. But the documentation was too thorough, the physicians too credible. These were experienced doctors describing what they had actually witnessed, struggling to find language for phenomena that shouldn't exist. And there was something else. Something he almost missed on the first read-through. In the margins of 11 different files, written in different hands but saying the same thing, patient mentioned recurring dreams. Always the same room. White walls. No windows. A door that won't open. Marcus had made a note to investigate further. That was before the new patient arrived in the emergency department last Tuesday. The patient with the ribcage growing inward. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus had been asleep for less than an hour when his phone vibrated across the nightstand. The screen showed the hospital's main line. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Dr. Webb, it's Nurse Patterson in the ED. We need you down here. Now." Something in her tone cut through the fog of sleep. Patterson had worked emergency medicine for 15 years. She didn't panic. "What's the presentation?" Marcus asked, already reaching for his clothes. "That's the thing, doctor. I can't." She paused, and he heard muffled voices in the background. "You need to see this yourself. The patient is stable, but the imaging, it doesn't make sense." 20 minutes later, Marcus pushed through the emergency department doors. The usual chaos of a Tuesday night greeted him. Gunshot wound in trauma 2, possible stroke in neuro 1, a drunk teenager vomiting in the hallway. But examination room 7 stood eerily quiet. Patterson met him outside, a tablet in her hands. Her face was pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Patient's name is David Reeves, 42 years old. Came in complaining of chest discomfort. No history of cardiac issues, non-smoker, no significant medical history." She swiped to the first X-ray. Initial chest film showed normal cardiac silhouette, clear lung fields. Standard pre-op imaging. Pre-op for what? Appendectomy. Scheduled for Thursday. But the chest discomfort got worse while he was here for pre-admission testing, so we did a follow-up film 30 minutes later. She swiped again. Marcus stared at the second image. Then back at the first. Then at the second again. These can't both be the same patient. Same patient. Same machine. 30 minutes apart. The ribcage in the second image had changed. New bone growth spiraled inward from the sternum and ribs, creating delicate structures that curved toward the heart and lungs like reaching fingers. The formations were too precise to be random calcification, too organic to be artificial. "This isn't possible," Marcus said quietly. "Bone growth doesn't happen in 30 minutes. It can't. There's more." Patterson swiped to a third image, taken 15 minutes after the second. The bony fingers had grown longer, more intricate. A fourth image showed them beginning to branch. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Where is he now? Inside. Awake. Calm, actually. He says it tickles. The patient sat on the examination table, dressed in a hospital gown, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when Marcus entered, offering a small smile that seemed completely at odds with the situation. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Dr. Webb. How are you feeling? Honestly?" "Pretty good. The chest thing is weird, but it doesn't hurt. Just feels like fingers tapping from the inside." David demonstrated by drumming his own fingers against his sternum. Kind of rhythmic. Marcus listened to his heart. Normal rate, regular rhythm. Lungs clear bilaterally. Blood pressure and oxygen saturation both normal. By every observable metric, David Reeves was a healthy middle-aged man. "Mr. Reeves, your imaging shows some unusual findings." I'd like to admit you for observation and further testing. The bones, right? David nodded. The tech showed me. It's growing, isn't it? Growing inward. We don't know what's happening yet. But yes, there appears to be new bone formation. It started in my dreams. Marcus paused in his documentation. I'm sorry? About 2 months ago, I started having these dreams. David's fingers stopped drumming. Always the same dream. I'm in a white room. No windows, no furniture. Just white walls and a door. I try to open the door, but it's locked. And while I'm standing there, I can feel something changing inside me. Like something waking up. The cold feeling in Marcus's stomach intensified. Patient mentioned dreams of the white room. Have you told anyone else about these dreams? My wife thinks I'm stressed about work. I'm an accountant. Tax season, you know. David laughed, but it sounded hollow. But the weird thing is, I'm not stressed. I feel fine. Better than fine, actually. I've had more energy, sleeping better than I have in years. Except for the dreams. Marcus pulled up a stool. Tell me exactly what happens in the dream. David's eyes took on a distant quality, as if he were seeing it again. I'm standing in the center of the room. The walls are so white they almost hurt to look at. The door is behind me. I always know where it is, even without turning around. And there's this sound. Very faint. Like breathing, but not quite. More like movement. Something shifting. Something in the room with you? No. Inside me. David placed a hand over his chest. I can feel it in the dream. Something inside my ribcage, growing, reaching. And when I wake up, just for a second, I can still feel it. The tickling. Marcus excused himself and stepped into the hallway. He pulled out his phone and dialed the hospital's archive extension. It rang 8 times before a sleepy voice answered. This is Dr. Webb. I need access to the basement archives. Tonight. An hour later, Marcus stood in the same yellowed corridor where he'd found the 17 files. But now he was looking for something specific. He pulled out files from different decades, scanning the handwritten notes and margins, the typewritten summaries, the photocopied correspondence. 1987, patient reports recurring dream of white room. Skeletal abnormalities began shortly after. 1992, dream content consistent with previous case files. Recommend psychiatric evaluation. 1998, patient adamant, dreams preceded physical changes. No history of mental illness. 2003, white room dream reported again. 5th case this year. The files went back to 1952. 70 years of patients, all describing the same dream. All developing impossible conditions shortly after. And in every case, the conditions worsened until the patient either died or disappeared from the medical record entirely. Marcus found one file from 1975 with a note clipped to the front, patient relocated to research facility. Case closed. No indication of which facility, or why. He photographed every page, his hands shaking slightly as he worked. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, pipes clanked in the walls. The basement felt colder than it should, and Marcus found himself glancing over his shoulder at the empty corridor. When he finished, he had documentation of 43 cases across 7 decades. 43 patients who dreamed of a white room and woke up changing. David Reeves was number 44. Marcus climbed the stairs back to the emergency department, his mind racing. He needed to contact other hospitals, see if they had similar cases. He needed to find out what happened to the patients who were relocated. He needed answers. But first, he needed to check on David Reeves. The examination room was empty. The hospital gown lay folded on the bed. David's clothes were gone. The only sign he'd been there at all was the tablet Patterson had left on the counter, still displaying the X-rays. Marcus picked it up and scrolled to the most recent image, taken just before he'd left for the archives. The bony fingers had reached David's heart. Marcus didn't sleep for the next 3 days. David Reeves had vanished. Hospital security found nothing on the cameras. One moment he was in examination room 7, the next the room was empty. No footage of him leaving, no sign of how he'd gotten past the nurse's station. He'd simply ceased to exist in the visual record. His wife filed a missing person report. Police came, took statements, reviewed the same blank footage. They seemed puzzled but not overly concerned. "Adults leave hospitals AMA all the time," one officer said. Marcus didn't mention the growing bones, the impossible X-rays, or the dreams. How could he? But David wasn't the only one. On Wednesday, a woman named Jennifer Torres came into the dermatology clinic. 28 years old, elementary school teacher, no significant medical history. She'd made the appointment 3 weeks ago, concerned about changes in her hair texture. The intake nurse called Marcus directly. Jennifer's hair had begun to transform. Not falling out, not changing color, transforming. Under microscopic examination, individual strands showed segmented structures resembling insect chitin. They were still flexible, still growing from her scalp, but the cellular composition was no longer human hair. "It started about 6 weeks ago," Jennifer said, sitting in the examination chair while Marcus studied samples under a portable microscope. "At first I thought it was just dry or damaged. But then I noticed it felt different. Harder. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can feel them moving. Moving? Like they're reaching for something." She laughed nervously. "I know how that sounds." Marcus set down the microscope. His mouth was dry. "Have you been having any unusual dreams?" Jennifer's expression changed. The nervous laughter died. "How did you know?" "Tell me about them." "There's a room. White walls. A door I can't open." Her voice became quieter. "And something inside me, waiting to come out. I can feel it in the dream, like it's just beneath my skin, pushing up through my hair follicles. When I wake up, my scalp tingles for hours." Marcus admitted her immediately. He ordered every test he could think of: full metabolic panel, autoimmune markers, genetic screening, neurological imaging. While waiting for results, he returned to the basement archives. This time, he wasn't looking for old cases. He was looking for patterns. He spread the photographed files across the table in an unused storage room, organizing them by date, age, gender, condition, searching for what connected them beyond the white room dream. The first pattern emerged within an hour: geography. Every patient had lived within a 50-mile radius of Portland. Some had been residents for years, others had only recently moved to the area. But all of them had been here when the dreams started. The second pattern took longer to find. Medical history. Not current conditions, but something from their past. Marcus had to dig through background information, family histories, childhood records. Every single patient had been treated at this hospital before. Not necessarily recently, but at some point in their lives. Some as children for routine procedures. Some as adults for minor emergencies. The connection was so mundane it had been overlooked for decades. They'd all been here. In this building. Marcus was still processing this when his phone rang. The lab. Jennifer Torres's blood work had come back. "Dr. Webb, we've run the samples 3 times. The results don't make sense." "Tell me." "Her blood contains trace amounts of chitin. Not just in her hair, in her bloodstream. And there's something else. An unidentified protein we can't classify. It's bonding to her cells, restructuring them at a molecular level. Is it killing her? That's the strangest part. She's perfectly healthy. Blood pressure normal. No signs of infection or rejection. Her body is accepting these changes as if they're supposed to be happening." Marcus ended the call and sat in the darkness of the storage room, surrounded by decades of impossible cases. His mind kept returning to one detail: the relocated patients. Where had they gone? He found a reference in a 1982 file. A single line in a letter from a Dr. Richard Halloway, who had been chief of medicine at the time. Patient transferred to sublevel facility for continued observation per Protocol White. Protocol White. Marcus had never heard of it. It wasn't in any current hospital documentation. But the phrase appeared in multiple files from the 1970s and 80s. Always the same wording. Always the same outcome. Patients disappeared from the record. He was searching for more references when his phone rang again. Patterson, from the emergency department. We have another one. The patient was a 9-year-old boy named Timothy Chin. His parents had brought him in because he'd been crying in pain, but when the tears hit his cheeks, they crystallized into tiny, sharp fragments that cut his skin. The pediatric nurse had collected several fragments in a specimen cup. Under examination, they resembled glass but with an organic structure unlike any known biomaterial. Timothy sat in the examination room, his cheeks bandaged, his eyes wide and frightened. His mother held his hand while his father paced near the window. When did this start? Marcus asked gently. 2 days ago, Timothy's mother said. We thought maybe it was the cold weather, dry eyes. But then we saw the blood. Timothy, has anything else been different lately? Any changes in how you feel? The boy looked at his parents, then back at Marcus. I've been having bad dreams. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What kind of dreams? There's a white room. And a door that won't open. And something inside me that wants to get out. Timothy's voice became small. It starts in my eyes. I can feel it there, turning my tears into something else. Marcus examined the boy thoroughly. Aside from the cuts on his cheeks and the impossible nature of his tears, Timothy appeared healthy. His eyes looked normal under examination, no cloudiness, no unusual structures. But when Marcus asked him to cry again, to try to produce tears, the boy shook his head violently. It hurts. It hurts when they come out now. Marcus admitted Timothy immediately. He was settling the family into a private room when his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Stop looking into this. You're putting yourself in danger. He stared at the message. Before he could respond, another came through. Protocol White is still active. The patients aren't missing. They're being protected. From what they're becoming. Marcus typed quickly. Who is this? The response came after a long pause. Someone who used to work in the sublevel. Get out while you can. The text stopped. When Marcus tried to call the number, it was disconnected. That night, 3 more patients appeared. A teenager whose bones had begun to hollow out like a bird's, making her so light she had to wear weighted clothing to avoid stumbling in mild wind. An elderly man whose tongue had developed chromatic cells, actually changing color to match whatever he looked at, blue when he stared at the sky, white when he closed his eyes. A middle-aged woman whose fingernails had fused together on each hand, forming hard, curved plates that resembled talons. All of them described the white room. All of them had been patients at Presbyterian Memorial before. And all of them were changing in ways that violated everything Marcus understood about human biology. He gathered them in a conference room on the 4th floor, those who were able to meet. Jennifer with her chitin hair. Timothy with his parents. The teenager with bird-like bones. 2 others from earlier in the week who hadn't yet disappeared. I need you to tell me everything, Marcus said. Every detail about the dreams. When they started, what you see, what you feel. They spoke for hours. The dreams were identical in structure but varied in one crucial way. What each person felt growing inside them matched their physical changes. Jennifer felt something pushing through her scalp. Timothy felt pressure behind his eyes. The teenager felt her bones hollowing, lightening. It's like the dream is a blueprint, Jennifer said softly, showing us what we're becoming. But why? Timothy's father demanded. Why is this happening to our son? Marcus had no answer. But he was starting to form a theory, one that terrified him more than the impossible conditions themselves. The hospital wasn't just where these patients had been treated before. It was the source. Something in this building, something in its history or structure, was causing these transformations. And Protocol White, whatever it was, had been the hospital's way of hiding the truth for decades. He was explaining this theory when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in after a moment, casting everything in dim red. Through the conference room window, Marcus could see most of the hospital was still lit. Just this wing, this floor, had lost power. "Everyone stay calm," he started to say. Then they heard it. A sound from the hallway. Not footsteps. Something else. A soft scraping, like bone against tile. The door to the conference room opened slowly. A figure stood in the doorway, backlit by emergency lighting. At first, Marcus thought it was a patient. Then his eyes adjusted. It was David Reeves. But changed. The bony fingers that had been growing inward had broken through his chest. They emerged from his sternum like a cage of white bone, intricate and beautiful and utterly wrong. David stood there, breathing normally despite the impossible protrusions, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "Dr. Webb," David said, his voice unchanged. "You shouldn't have started looking. They'll know now. They'll come for all of us." "Who? Who will come?" David stepped into the room. The bony cage around his chest seemed to pulse faintly, as if it had its own heartbeat. "The ones who made the White Room. The ones who've been waiting for us to change." He looked at the other patients. "We're not sick, doctor. We're evolving. And they've been studying us for 70 years, waiting to see what we become." Behind David, in the darkened hallway, Marcus saw movement. More figures. More patients. Some he recognized from old photographs in the basement files, people who should be decades older or long dead. They had all been changing. All these years. And now they had come back. Marcus stood frozen as the transformed patients filed into the conference room. There were at least 15 of them, perhaps more in the shadows of the hallway. Each one bore impossible modifications to their human form. A woman whose spine had erupted through her back in crystalline formations, spreading like frozen branches. A man whose skin had developed scales that caught the emergency lighting, iridescent and shifting. Someone whose face had become almost featureless, smooth as polished bone except for dark, hollow eyes. Jennifer Torres grabbed Timothy and pulled him close. The teenager with hollow bones pressed herself against the far wall, her breath coming in short gasps. "Don't be afraid," David said, his bone-caged chest rising and falling with each breath. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Marcus demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. "About what comes next." David moved further into the room. The bony protrusions from his chest seemed to orient toward Marcus like sensors. "The dreams aren't random, Doctor. They're a calling. Someone, something, is reaching through them, changing us. Preparing us." "Preparing us for what?" "To go home." The word hung in the air. Home. Marcus thought of the White Room, the door that wouldn't open in the dreams. "The sublevel," Marcus said quietly. "Protocol White. That's where they took you, isn't it? That's where the facility is." David nodded. "Below the hospital. Far below. Built in 1952, the same year the first patient reported the White Room dream. They didn't create it to study us, Doctor. They created it to keep us contained." "Why? What are you?" "We don't know." The crystalline woman spoke now, her voice like wind through frozen branches. "But we know we're connected to something older than this hospital, older than this city. The White Room exists somewhere else. Somewhere real. And when our change is complete, we'll be able to pass through the door." "And go where?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely a whisper. None of the transformed patients answered. Marcus's mind raced through everything he'd learned. The geographic clustering. The hospital connection. The 70 years of cases. "The building," he said. "There's something in the building itself. Something that triggers this." "Yes." David stepped closer. "In the sublevel. The original research facility. They found it when they were excavating for the foundation in 1951. A chamber. Very old. Predating any known settlement in the area. Found what? We don't know what to call it. A door, maybe. Or a window. Something that looks into the White Room. They sealed it, built the hospital around it, tried to forget about it. But it doesn't forget. It calls to certain people. Changes them. Prepares them. Timothy's father stood up. This is insane. We need to leave. Now. You can't. The scaled man's voice was flat, emotionless. Once the dreams start, you're marked. Distance doesn't matter. We had patients who moved across the country. The changes still came. The only choice is to accept it or resist it. And if we resist? David's expression darkened. The changes don't stop. They just become more painful. More destructive. We've seen people tear themselves apart trying to stop what's happening. It's better to accept, to let the transformation complete. No. Marcus moved to stand between David and the other patients. There has to be another way. Medical intervention. Surgery. Something. We tried everything, doctor. For 70 years, they tried everything in the sublevel facility. Nothing stops it. Nothing slows it. The only thing that helps is understanding what we're becoming. And what is that? David placed a hand on his bone-caged chest. Bridges. We're becoming bridges between this world and wherever the White Room exists. And when enough of us complete the transformation, the door will open. Not just in dreams. Here. In reality. The lights in the conference room flickered. Through the window, Marcus saw the main hospital beginning to experience power fluctuations as well. Lights dimming, brightening, creating a pulsing rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. It's happening, the crystalline woman said. The connection is strengthening. More people will dream tonight. More will begin changing. How many? Marcus asked. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. The radius is expanding. Whatever is on the other side of that door, it's getting closer. Pushing through. David turned to the other patients in the room. Jennifer, Timothy, the hollow-boned teenager. You all feel it, don't you? The pull. The certainty that you're meant for something else. Jennifer's hand went to her hair. Timothy touched his bandaged cheeks. The teenager looked down at her impossibly light bones. I felt it in my dreams, Timothy said softly. Something calling me home. But this isn't my home. Is it? No, David said gently. I don't think it ever was. Marcus grabbed his phone, started to dial 911, then stopped. What would he say? That patients were transforming into impossible forms? That something beneath the hospital was calling to them through dreams? They'd think he was having a breakdown. The sublevel, he said. Take me there. Now. David shook his head. It's sealed. Has been for decades. After the last group of patients transformed completely and passed through, they locked it down. The hospital administration pretends it doesn't exist. But you've been there. We live there, doctor. Those of us who've completed the change. We can't live in normal society anymore. So we stay below, waiting. David's bony protrusions shifted, creating a soft clicking sound, waiting for the door to fully open. The building shuddered. Not an earthquake, something else. A vibration that seemed to come from deep below, resonating through the steel and concrete. In the hallway, the emergency lights began to pulse in that same rhythm. And somewhere, far beneath the hospital, something ancient began to wake. The shaking stopped as suddenly as it had started. The transformed patients stood motionless, their heads tilted slightly as if listening to something only they could hear. Then, one by one, they turned and filed out of the conference room without a word. David was the last to leave, pausing in the doorway. We'll be in the sublevel when you're ready, Dr. Webb. You know how to find us now. He glanced at Jennifer, Timothy, and the others. All of you do. When the changes progress far enough, you'll feel the pull. Don't fight it. The ones who fight suffer the most. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Marcus rushed to the window. In the parking lot below, he could see the transformed patients emerging from the building and moving toward the oldest section of the hospital, the 1940s wing with its Art Deco facade. They disappeared around the corner, heading toward what Marcus now realized was a service entrance he'd passed 1,000 times without really noticing. The entrance to the sublevel. He turned back to the remaining patients. Jennifer Torres looked pale, her chitin hair catching the emergency lighting in an unsettling way. Timothy Chin sat curled in his mother's arms, his bandaged face hidden against her shoulder. The hollow-boned teenager stared out the window, her expression distant. "We should run tests," Marcus said, though even as he spoke the words felt hollow. "There has to be a biological explanation. A pathogen, maybe. A environmental toxin. Something we can treat." "You don't believe that," Jennifer said quietly. "I can see it in your face. You know this is something else." She was right. Everything Marcus had seen, everything documented in those basement files, pointed to something beyond conventional medicine. But accepting that meant accepting that everything he built his career on, evidence-based medicine, scientific rigor, rational explanation, might not apply here. His phone buzzed. A message from hospital administration: report to director's office immediately. Do not discuss tonight's events with anyone. So they knew. Of course they knew. They'd been hiding this for 70 years. Marcus looked at the patients in the room. "I can't force you to stay. But I'm going to keep investigating. There has to be a way to stop this, or at least slow it down. What if we don't want to stop it?" The hollow-boned teenager spoke for the first time since the transformed patients had left. "What if David's right? What if we're becoming something better? You're 17 years old. You don't know what you're saying. I know that I've felt wrong my whole life. Like I didn't fit in my own skin. And now, for the first time, I feel like I'm becoming what I was always meant to be." She spread her arms, and Marcus could see how thin they'd become, how delicate. "It doesn't feel like a disease, doctor. It feels like finally coming home." Marcus had no response to that. Timothy's mother stood, lifting her son. "We're leaving. Whatever this is, we want no part of it. The dreams will continue," Marcus warned. "The changes. Then we'll deal with it somewhere else. Anywhere but here." She carried Timothy out. His father followed, pausing only to say, "You should leave too, doctor. Before this place takes you like it took them." Jennifer and the teenager remained. "I'm staying," Jennifer said. "I need answers." The teenager nodded. "Me too." Marcus took a deep breath. "Then we go down together. We find the sublevel. We see what they've been hiding all these years." The building shuddered again, a deep resonance that seemed to rise from far below. And in that moment, Marcus felt something he never experienced before, a faint tickling sensation near his heart. Marcus pressed his hand to his chest. The tickling sensation faded, but he knew what it meant. He'd been exposed too long. Spent too much time in the building, too many hours in the basement with those files, breathing the same air, walking the same corridors. The white room would come for him tonight, in his dreams. And then the changes would begin. "Doctor?" Jennifer noticed his expression. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he lied. Then, because lying felt wrong given everything, "No, I'm not fine. I think I'm becoming one of them." The teenager actually smiled. "Welcome to the club." They made their way down through the hospital, avoiding the main corridors. The power had stabilized, but the building felt different now. Alive somehow. Aware. Marcus could feel it in the walls, in the air itself. A presence that had always been here, patient and waiting. The service entrance to the sublevel was unlocked. The stairs descended into darkness that the emergency lighting couldn't quite penetrate. Marcus used his phone flashlight, and Jennifer and the teenager did the same. Their 3 beams cut through the blackness as they descended, the temperature dropping with each flight. 5 floors down. 10. 15. This can't be right. Marcus said. We should have hit bedrock by now. It's not following normal physics anymore, the teenager replied. Her voice echoed strangely. We passed the boundary 3 floors ago. Can't you feel it? Marcus could. The air had become thicker, heavier. And there was a sound, very faint, that breathing noise David had described from the dreams. Something shifting in vast, unseen spaces. The stairs ended at a heavy metal door marked with a faded symbol Marcus didn't recognize. He pushed it open. The sublevel facility spread before them. A vast space carved from living rock, lit by bioluminescent growths that pulsed with that same rhythmic heartbeat. Medical equipment from various decades stood abandoned in clusters. Hospital beds. Surgical theaters. All the apparatus of trying to understand and contain what couldn't be understood or contained. And the patients. Dozens of them. Some Marcus recognized from old photographs, unchanged despite decades. Others had transformed so completely they barely resembled humans anymore. They moved through the space in a strange choreography, gathering around something at the center. A door. It stood alone, unsupported by any wall. 10 feet tall, carved from white stone that seemed to glow from within. The surface was completely smooth except for intricate symbols that hurt to look at directly. This was the White Room's door. The real one. And it was opening. Finally, David's voice came from somewhere in the crowd of transformed patients. We've been waiting for you, Dr. Webb. We knew you'd come. We knew you'd feel the call. Marcus approached the door slowly. Up close, he could see that it wasn't quite solid. The surface rippled occasionally, like water disturbed by something moving beneath. What's on the other side? He asked. Home, David said simply. Where we were always meant to be. Where all of us are meant to be. I'm a doctor. I'm meant to heal people, to help them. And you will. By helping us return. By completing your own transformation and passing through with us. David's bone-caged chest opened slightly, revealing something writhing inside, something that might have once been his heart but had become something else entirely. You've already started changing, haven't you? You felt it tonight. Marcus wanted to deny it. But as he stood before the door, he could feel his heart beating in a new rhythm, matching the pulse of the door, the pulse of the building, the pulse of whatever vast and ancient thing waited on the other side. How long? He asked quietly. Days. Maybe weeks. The changes accelerate the closer you are to the door. David moved to stand beside him. You can fight it if you want. You can run. But I think you already know the truth, Doctor. Marcus looked at the door. At its rippling white surface. And realized that part of him, a part that was growing stronger with each passing moment, wanted to see what lay beyond. There's one thing I need to do first, he said. He pulled out his phone. The signal was weak this far down, but it was there. He opened the voice recording app. This is Dr. Marcus Webb. Today's date is... He paused, realizing he'd lost track of what day it was. It doesn't matter. If you're hearing this, I'm either already gone or I've become something that isn't quite human anymore. I came to Presbyterian Memorial Hospital 23 years ago as a physician. I believed in science, in evidence, in the rational explanation for every phenomenon. I still believe in those things. But I also now believe in something else, something older and stranger than our modern understanding can accommodate. There is a door beneath this hospital. A door to somewhere else. And there are people, or things that used to be people, who are going through it. I don't know if they're being destroyed or transformed. I don't know if what waits on the other side is malevolent or benign or simply so alien we have no framework to judge it. But I know that I'm going to find out. Because as I stand here recording this, I can feel my heartbeat changing. I can feel something growing inside my chest. And tonight, when I close my eyes, I know I'll see the White Room. I'll see the door. And I know that one day soon I'll walk through it. Marcus ended the recording and emailed it to himself, to colleagues, to medical boards and research institutions. If nothing else, there would be a record. Then he turned to face the door again. It was more open now than when he'd first arrived. Through the gap, he could glimpse something on the other side. Not darkness. Not light. Something else entirely. A space that existed in dimensions his eyes couldn't quite process. And in that space, movement. Shapes that might have been people, or might have been something wearing the memory of human form. "They're waiting for us," David said. "They've been waiting for 70 years for enough of us to change. For enough bridges to form." Bridges to what? To them. To their world. And to bring something of their world here. David's expression was peaceful, almost beatific. "It's not an invasion, Doctor. It's a merging. Two realities becoming one." Marcus thought of Jennifer and the teenager, still somewhere behind him in the shadows. He thought of Timothy Chin and his crystalline tears. He thought of all the patients in the files, all the ones who changed and suffered and died fighting what they couldn't understand. "When?" he asked. "Soon. When the door is fully open. When enough of us have passed through and enough of them have passed back." David looked at the gathering crowd of transformed patients. "You can help, Doctor. Your transformation will be important. Physicians have certain resonances, certain connections to the body, to healing, to change. When you pass through, you'll open the door wider for others." Marcus felt the tickling near his heart intensify. Felt something beginning to unfurl inside his chest cavity. And in that moment, looking at the impossible door, at the transformed patients, at the reality he could no longer deny, Dr. Marcus Webb made his choice. "Not yet," he said. He turned and walked back toward the stairs. Jennifer and the teenager fell in behind him. "You can't run from this," David called after them. "The changes won't stop. You'll be back." Marcus didn't respond. He climbed the stairs, feeling his heartbeat grow more irregular with each step, feeling something in his chest beginning to grow. David was right. The changes wouldn't stop. And yes, he would probably be back. But not tonight. Tonight, he had research to do. Files to organize. Patients to protect. Tonight, he was still Dr. Marcus Webb. Tomorrow he might be something else. The hospital stood quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. In his office, Marcus sat surrounded by files and research, documenting everything he'd seen. His chest ached with each breath, and when he coughed, he tasted something metallic. He worked until sunrise, then beyond. Staff arrived for morning shifts. Patients checked in for procedures. The normal rhythm of the hospital continued around him. But in the basement, 17 floors below, the door continued to open. And across Portland, in homes and apartments and offices, people were beginning to dream of a white room. The changes were spreading. And Dr. Marcus Webb, typing notes with hands that had begun to feel strange and foreign, wondered how long he had before he joined the others in the sublevel. Before he walked through the door and discovered what waited on the other side. His phone buzzed. A new patient in the emergency department. A woman complaining that her bones were growing inward. Marcus stood, grabbed his white coat, and headed for the elevator. There was still work to do,